Thank you for joining us for the Q&A of Coded Bias. I'm so happy to have here with me the director, Shalini Kantayya. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for screening Coded Bias at the Hamptons International Film Festival. We're thrilled to be here.
It's such an important subject matter. And I'm wondering if you can start by talking a little bit about how did you find the story and how did you get connected with Joy?
Well, most of my work has to do with how disruptive technologies impact working people, people of color, marginalized communities. Do disruptive technologies make the world more fair or less fair? And I sort of stumbled upon the work of Joy Buolamwini and Cathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Math Destruction, and sort of stumbled down the rabbit hole of sort of this dark side, the dark underbelly of big technologies that we interact with every day.
At this point, China has the most extensive surveillance network in the world. And these systems of surveillance are not only limited to facial recognition, but they also have voice patterns. They analyze voice pattern, even the way a person walks, so like gait analysis. You touched upon the way it's used in Hong Kong against protesters. We know about what's happening in China with the Uyghurs minority, and also, unfortunately, even on American soil with the identification of the Black Lives Matter protesters. Do you think this is the new battleground for civil rights?
I absolutely do. And I think that when you hear about what's happening in China, where the government has unfettered access to your data, and something as intimate as your face is being used like a credit card throughout society, we kind of think of that as a Black Mirror episode in a galaxy far, far away. But what was most terrifying to me in the making of Coded Bias was to learn that, we talk about these things like they're privacy issues in the US, and I think the more accurate term would be invasive surveillance. And the kind of information that Google has about us or Facebook has about us, this is stuff that would make the Stasi look like they had sort of a light touch. So I think that we're in an era where we've just offered up so much of our personal lives without a clear understanding of the fact that these systems are making predictions about us all the time, and that we can, and actually are not neutral, that they're biased, that they can be predatory at times. And so what I learned is basically everything we love in civil society, fair housing, fair employment, a fair criminal justice system, access to education, everything we love is going to be totally transformed by AI, and already is. And these automated decision-making systems are often the first gatekeeper to opportunity. And my fear is that we will erode civil rights under this myth that machines are neutral, and they're not.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of like concept of algorithmic determinism is comes very clear through your film, and is definitely something that we need to explore more and more. Just as your film was premiering at Sundance, New York Times published an expose of a firm called Clearview AI. I'm wondering if you're familiar with that story. It was also broke by a woman, Kashmir Hill. It's sort of like another version of Amazon's facial recognition, but in a way more terrifying because of it's even less regulated. Do you think this is just something that's unavoidable and is going to continue to happen?
Well, if we don't have any laws or rules in place, if there's no entity where technology companies, look, let's frame it this way. In June, we saw IBM said they would stop deploying, using, and selling facial recognition. Microsoft said that they would not sell facial recognition to police departments, and Amazon said that they would take a 1-year pause. And that happened because I hope in part because of the film, but also because of the incredible research and bravery of Joy Buolamwini and Timnit Gebru and Deborah Raji, the scientists in Coded Bias, and people connecting racial bias to what could happen to our civil liberties. My issue is that until until this happened, until these 3 Black women scientists sort of stepped forward, these companies this wasn't on a shelf somewhere. This was being sold to the FBI. This was being sold to ICE. This was already being deployed at scale by our police departments, often in secret without us knowing it. And it's racially biased. And how did the tech companies miss that?
Exactly.
And not only that, the way that the technology is being used is on the populations that it's most biased around. And we saw in January, a Detroit man was the first US man, because again, we have no laws. Oftentimes these tools are being used in secret. A Detroit man was arrested in front of his family and his neighbors, the kind of stuff you don't recover from, and held in a cell for 30 hours and never asked his license. He was misidentified by police use of facial recognition. And so what I am terrified about is that there's no system in place. We saw there was a moment where I was sitting listening to Joy testify in Congress, and Jim Jordan, who is a very conservative Republican from Ohio, had this moment where he said, wait a minute, 117 million Americans are in a police database that that they can access without a warrant, and there's no one in an elected office overseeing this. And seeing him, a Republican, be as terrified as the Democrats around how this stuff can go from a technology company onto our streets, essentially with no process involved. And that's what terrifies me. And I think people often ask, like, do you think they're good uses of AI? And do you like technology? And I'm just always overwhelmed by the question, because the fact that I believe in an FDA does not mean that I don't like food. It means that I believe in a certain quality and standard of practices, and that companies should have to prove that this stuff isn't biased, that it won't do undue harm, and that there should be a process for bringing these technologies into society, especially when they can be deployed at such a large scale.
For sure. Europe already has like an established regulatory framework, and they has the GDPR, which protects data and privacy. They've had that since 2018. Why do you think America is lagging behind in this respect?
Well, our tech companies have just sort of unbridled power. They also don't pay taxes and so many other things. But I will say, and they're a huge lobby. I mean, this is one of the most powerful industries in the history of the world, founded by a lot of 25-year-old white men. And what I also think is that there is just this massive gap in education to our lawmakers, first to our public and then to our lawmakers. I mean, our lawmakers often don't know how Facebook works, just some basic 101. And so what I hope Coded Bias will be is sort of an inconvenient truth about our technologies, not because we have to empower ourselves. It can't be like, oh my God, it's AI, it's math. We're so overwhelmed. We have to have some literacy. And I think when the public has literacy, we can push our lawmakers to have literacy and in turn legislation.
Since you mentioned Facebook and we're in an election year, as we're filming this, we're exactly a month before election. You profiled the Facebook experiment in the film. About 2 weeks ago, there was a memo that leaked, written by a former Facebook data scientist, Sophie Zhang, who talks about the sort of like concrete examples through which Facebook has ignored or was slow to act in this on evidence that either sway elections or influenced election.
I'm not going to mince words here. I'll cut in and I won't mince words here. When Facebook decided that it was not important for political speech and political ads to be subject to accuracy, Facebook became an anti-democratic institution. It turned its back on democracy. You cannot say something as sacred as our political speech, our political ads have to be true. Otherwise, we are privy to misinformation and polarizing. And I will say that I don't think Facebook has made a strong enough commitment to democratic values in its work, and it shouldn't be up to Facebook. It was great that these companies put down their racially biased invasive surveillance technology that was being used by people who have power, law enforcement, but it shouldn't be up to the technology companies whether they pick up or put down these tools. There should be, we the people should have some voice in these technologies. I also just want to say that we've not yet grappled with the invisible algorithmic hand, that silent nudge in our lives that's saying, you know, are you sure you don't want those yellow shoes? Do you want those yellow shoes? And it starts off like that. And then the next thing you know, you're being marketed to for political speech or other things. And we haven't yet grappled with this invisible hand. That experiment that Zainab talks about, which was published in Nature, which Facebook did twice and was widely reported, shows that with just a small subtlety in the algorithm, something as small as saying I voted with your friends icons at the bottom or not, swayed in excess that could have changed the 2016 election, right? Yeah. And we also know that you know, Facebook knows what political party we belong to. The algorithm knows so many intimate details about us. And so it's just my strong feeling that we need some protections in place and also some education about how these algorithms work.
Absolutely. And I think you touch upon this, the importance, it's creating a feedback loop that is just perpetuating these biases, especially in law enforcement.
Yes, in law enforcement and in information. I mean, I so miss being in the theater with you. And one of the things I love about cinema is that we get to engage with people radically different than us, and ideas that are get introduced to radically different ideas. That are different from us, not radical ideas, but you know, ideas that are different from our mindset. And that's what makes a healthy democracy. Challenge my views. And we see now that our public sphere is moved to the technology space, that public square is being eroded, and we have to protect that.
And because I know we have to wrap up soon, can you give me some updates on Joy and the rest of the wonderful women you have profiled in the documentary and sort of like the work they're doing? And
well, I feel like I can only speak about myself. Joy has a whole mouthful. You should, she's doing incredible work. You should follow the Algorithm Justice League and find out more about her work. I don't want to speak on her behalf. But we are working together to use this film for social change and hoping that lawmakers will see this film. I'm so grateful that you have seen this film, and I hope that you'll talk about it at your dinner tables and among your colleagues. And we will be releasing the film November 11th in theaters, 11/11/2020. And we hope that you will follow the film at Coded Bias and at codedbias.com for updates to share with your friends.
Shalini, thank you so much for being here with us. We're really appreciating. And hopefully next time is going to be in person.
I hope so. I miss the Hamptons. Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you.